What's up, everybody? I am Lauren Kalil, and we are here for another episode talking about everything nutrition as we get closer to Monster Games. At this point, we are in the thick of the CrossFit Games season, but just about 5 months away from Monster Games. And if you are getting ready to compete, it's time. It was already time to start dialing in your nutrition. And we are here to do that with Apex Nutrition. It's so great to work with them because they are very centric on the individual, helping you reach your goals. Depending wherever you are, they are going to meet you there and make sure that you can achieve everything and more that you want when it comes to your performance. You can head to their Instagram page, APEXPNC, and you can schedule a free consultation today. And here to talk all about nutrition with me, Brad Giglio. He is a new father, well, already a father, but now has another
Newer.
child, newer, now a dad of two. Congratulations. I'm glad you were
Thank
able
you.
to sit down with us to talk about nutrition because I'm sure it's something that you're focused on too right now, trying to get food in while taking care of two little ones at home.
Yeah, this is definitely, they say one's a big jump, two's a leap. And it's like it's totally true. Like it's not because especially when you have like a 3-year-old who wants all the attention, doing all the things, and you have like this brand new baby who obviously literally can do nothing. And balancing that out, it's like it's an experience, but I wouldn't change it for anything. I'm super excited.
Well, it's great to have you here, founder of Apex Performance. And one thing that we're going to focus on today is talking about how people can start getting their nutrition dialed in when it comes to training. Last episode, we talked about the 5 myths when it comes to nutrition, but now we're getting a little bit more specific as, people are hitting the gym, maybe they're on a specific cycle as they prepare for Monster Games. But what are some of those things that they should be focusing in on when it comes to nutrition when they are at the gym working towards this goal?
I mean, it's a great question, and it's obviously, I mean, pretty much anybody in the space, we all know macros, calories. It's been around. It's nothing new. The science behind performance nutrition, how to do it, is not anything overly groundbreaking. Obviously, we find new science and research and like how to maybe optimize those things, which is something that I really focus on with athletes and stuff like that. The idea, though, is whatever is tracked is managed. So a lot of athletes that you'll run to, like, I don't have time to track. I don't want to do the tracking. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. Honestly, if you want to be competitive, and I've been doing competitive nutrition especially for games athletes for the last, I mean, like this is my 7th, maybe 8th year going into it. I have to double check. A little tired, so I'm not sure if that number's right. The if you're not on it, if you are not on your nutrition, meaning you're not tracking it to a point. I'm not saying you got to track every single gram down to sugar-free gum. That's ridiculous. But if you don't at least start with a spot where you're tracking it, you're leaving something on the table. So that idea is really what I tell people. Like, you got to embrace that first, outside of just grinding, which is how you used to be able to do it. If you're a CrossFitter and you wanted to be elite, you can learn how to suffer. And there's still a point to that. But now, so it's such a vast field. If you're not focusing on some of these things, like you're going to be missing out on reps. And that's really what I would encourage people to, whether it's using a company like us. M2 is amazing. There's so many ones out there. Somebody is in your gym, just going online and finding out what you likely is your base level of active calories is going to be huge. And then breaking down the macros, kind of like what we talked about last time, in terms of what makes the most sense for you, and start from there first. That's a must. You have to do that.
When I think of maybe some stereotypes, and maybe they're not stereotypes, but you go to the gym, you want to make sure that you have some carbs surrounding your workout. Every now and then you'll see somebody with, some Starbursts or some Airheads or
Mhm.
what we grew up learning was junk food. But should those be treats that we surround with our workout, or is that something that maybe needs to go under the conversation of eating for performance versus training?
Yeah, there is definitely that piece of it. So what you're seeing there is people trying to get access to essentially pure lines of sugar as quickly as possible. Typically, that's the simplest, quickest to digest one. That's why you see a lot of people doing like the Mott's and stuff like that because that's pretty heavy and like dextrose. I personally try to encourage the athletes that I work with to go a little bit more of a natural route, especially when it comes to
Mm.
the training and leading up to it, right? The idea of building foundational nutrition concepts with the idea of competing is kind of ass backwards in a sense. Like we want to be looking at training as a place where we literally are practicing eating and learning what makes the most sense for our body. Your body digests things differently within certain period of times with even certain workouts. You could eat differently if you're doing a strength session as opposed to a high end, high output, high intensity metcon. It's very different, and how your body and your stomach are going to feel with that is going to be different. So looking at that part of it, if you're looking at training, right, you're 100% right. Those are things that should be convenient. Like that's something that should be convenient. If you're a competitor and you want to be focused and you really want to work hard, then we need to be looking at the small stuff and how to do those things well. Grabbing Starburst out the gate or gummies or something like that, it has its place at some point. Leading up to competition or training for a competition, I really don't feel like that's something that is going to be overly beneficial in terms of whole health as well, right? People are competing, they're burning through sugars, it's not that big of a deal. But in terms of like your mindset and understanding like, oh, like dried fruit, like, oh, there's these other things. There's whole foods that we can get that are not only going to react similarly to that, but at the same time will be more beneficial from a micronutrient standpoint, right? So we're able to get things that are heavier in color, which are going to be better suited for filling in gaps with micronutrients like vitamins and phytonutrients that you'll find in like plant-based things and stuff like that. So I really try to give people that perspective first. Exactly what you're saying. It has a place, but I would push something like that more towards competition and not so much
Mm.
training, eating. Yeah.
Okay, so getting back to training, the first thing, if people maybe have never followed a nutrition program before, or maybe they're just trying to get back into it, is you got to know your calories in. So, would you say the best place to start is just following um, like a food tracker, or like at what point do you actually track everything?
Yeah. So for any of the athletes that I start to work with on a competitive level, whether they're a mom in the gym who's getting really fired up for the open or someone who's going to the games, no matter what, they have to track a month. They have to.
Mm.
And that for me is more of a data collection process. If you're doing this on your own, you don't necessarily have to go that far into it because I do know for a lot of people it can be a sensitive issue. It can be a bit triggering in terms of like food sensitivities and maybe experiences that you've had growing up with things. And those are obviously conversations that we'll have with people when it comes to this kind of stuff. But the idea there is you need to know exactly what fuel you're getting in. Your expenditure is going to be a little bit different, right? Depending on your days. So finding a baseline of calories is going to be hyper important. Breaking it down from there in terms of like finding like a macro calculator and things like that. You don't have to get overly complicated with it, right? For most men, and this is all over the internet, anywhere from 1 gram to zero point 0.9 grams multiplied by your body weight is going to be a good place to start. For women who are athletes, anywhere from zero point 0.7 to zero point 0.9, depending on muscle density and leanness. None of those are specific to everybody. I
And what
might
is
be a
that
male.
calculation for?
To figure out your protein,
Oh,
levels.
okay.
That's
Mhm.
gonna be a big one. Yeah, sorry, I left that word out again. Dad brain. Sorry. The
That's okay.
that's a good place to start in terms of like finding the recovery need from your body from a protein standpoint. And the reason we start with protein, especially when it comes to training, is because recovery is huge and muscle breakdown is rampant. Like you're breaking your body down consistently, right? It's always happening, especially if you're a competitive CrossFitter doing something like the Monster Games or Wadapalooza or the Desert City Classic. Those are high competitive environments, right? It's not semis and it's not the CrossFit Games, but I mean, those people in those competitions are hyper fit and they're really pushing it. So that's a good place to start as a part of like a foundational piece of like, okay, here's where I need to begin. Because for most people, especially Western culture, protein tends to be a little bit more scarce in terms of like if we were just
Mhm.
to go out and start buying stuff, like obviously you go to the grocery store, it's there. But if you're not really planning ahead and understanding how much you're getting in, it gets harder to get it like on the fly. And if you are getting it on the fly, it's also hyper expensive. So having that, at least that foundational piece to start with, is really good because it kind of allows you to see where you're at from a food volume standpoint. Because all of a sudden I can say, okay, hey, Steve, you're 180 pounds. Based on all the things that you're doing in your leanness, I think you need to be somewhere around 200 grams of protein. And he's like, cool. And all of a sudden he eats that, and maybe he's not even close to that naturally. He's going to feel really terrible. Right. So understanding that, yeah. So like understanding that portion of it first really starts to allows you to start like building it backwards in a bit just to see really where you're at. Cause then you can start to fill in carbs and fats so much more easily, just with our culture and like where we can get foods from and like the level of like volume with those things are so much more rampant. It's just easier. So finding that number first is usually where I encourage people to start, and then we start to really mold it around that. If we have to bring it down, it's not a big deal. It's not like there's like this big fall off. It's more of like what's most ideal for you to be able to get in
So
consistently. That's the big one, consistently.
if somebody has figured out, okay, where their baseline macros and calories are, then they work with
Mhm.
you or somebody else, they figure out what their macros are. How important is food timing going to be when implementing it into training?
Good question again. Research is very, very flexible on this. Anywhere from it doesn't matter to 2 hours to 30 minutes before. It's really kind of all over the place. There's varying amounts, like do this much, zero point 0.0 X grams per this. I always fall back on what is easily executable. That's a word, executable. That's
Yeah,
right.
we'll go with it.
Easy to execute. Yeah, we'll go with it, right? I've had like 3 hours of sleep. The
This is our episode. We can do whatever we
this
want
is
here.
it, right? This is it. No one's judging me. And what are you going to see on a consistent basis? Because again, like we talked about last time, the myth piece is
Mhm.
consistency is going to win above all else. If you shoot the moon on these numbers and you're outside of it and it becomes a brain buster to execute on it every single day, one, you're going to create a ton of burnout on top of hard training. You're gonna start to slide. You're gonna backslide on it. It's like super super easy. So we really have to find um, room and how we can work that from a timing standpoint. Same thing. If you are somebody who's working all day and you have the afternoon session and you don't get a chance to get to the gym until maybe 5 p.m. and you got an hour and a half of sessions to do and work this or work that, and you only have a 15-minute ride to the gym and you really can't eat at work, stuffing your face with whatever macro number for 15 minutes is going to be really difficult. I always say something is better than nothing, but that can be extremely varying, right? And it could just be a couple sips of a protein shake and maybe half of a banana because that's what you can stomach and you feel okay during warm up, and then you can move into that session and that's your consistency. And then you have your meal when you get home. That's going to pay way more dividends than trying to hit some sort of specific number. Um, if you do have a perfect world and you can execute as you see fit, you like to see something, and this is something that I do. Like I like to see my athletes hit somewhere around the 30-30-30 mark, just for simple fact. If you're going to split a plate into thirds, a third of it's protein, a third of it's going to be some healthy fats, a third of it's going to be carbohydrates. Now, the coaching portion of it becomes very, very specific in terms of like what is going to be optimal for that person. But in terms of whole foods, things that are going to be lower in fiber are going to be better because that's harder to digest, right? Some starchy things like that, potatoes, sweet potatoes, rice, especially white rice is easier to digest for most. Um, I like basmati or jasmine. I don't really encourage people to do the minute rice because that's highly processed, right? You're going to see higher rates of digestion with that kind of stuff. So you're going to have it more accessible to your system because your system's going to have digested, not all of it, but it's going to start to process, and it's not going to be ultra disrupted to your digestive system while you're training, right? And TMI for some people, but if you're in the middle of a workout and you've eaten super close and you're like all of a sudden like you're 12 thrusters in and you're like, yo, this isn't
This
good.
ain't
Like, and
good.
it becomes a bit of a mental game, right? Everyone knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
That's something that's to be considered because your body doesn't digest food when it's at high output levels, right? The whole system doesn't do that. That's why they call it rest and digest. Like your body doesn't churn food while you're doing high intensity exercise. So the idea there's something in experimenting with it anywhere from an hour to 2 hours. Most people are going to feel pretty good. Energy levels are going to be pretty good going into their session. Same thing with post workout. If you're able to get something in, I always tell people sooner rather than later, just
Mhm.
because it's one of those things where it's like, just like anything, if you wait too long, maybe something comes up and you don't get a chance to get it in, and that's going to throw off your schedule more than anything else, which is going to impact your consistency. It's not that the numbers are going to be disrupted and oh my god, I just killed my anabolic window and la la la. It's not that. It's more along the lines of like, is it going to disrupt your remaining parts of your day? Like, is that going to hit the domino that's going to kind of jack everything up? That's why I have to work out first thing in the morning. If I don't, it's not
Mhm.
happening.
Me too.
Right? It's just
Too
not.
much
It's just like
happens.
everything. Yeah, it is, and you're allowing everything else to kind of just disrupt it. So it's like I tell people, of course, there's an ideal time to eat for some people. For some people, it might be like immediately after. I can grab a protein shake and eat something right after. It doesn't bother me at all.
Mhm.
Some people got to wait 30 to 40 minutes. Some people got to wait an hour. Whatever it is, as long as it's consistent and feels good on your stomach and you're digesting it well, if you're starting to get tummy rumblies and like all that kind of stuff, it might not be your macros. It might be your source of your food. That might be something to consider. So that's why I say practice eating, because macros don't tell at all. And I really kind of hate it because it's kind of like this cookie cutter lazy way of like looking at it.
Mhm.
People are individuals. We got to look at what makes the most sense and what sourcing is going to be important. So that idea is really what I encourage. Long
You
answer to a short question.
No, but there's a lot of good little nuggets in there, and you said that something is better than nothing when it comes to,
Yeah.
eating before training, but also keeping in mind that we're all individuals and going to
Mhm.
react differently. But I mean, even people like you and I going to the gym at 5:30, 6:30 AM, a lot of time I do not want to eat before I go to the gym, and
Yeah.
you see some I don't know if you would call it research, but some things on the internet that talk about fasted cardio or a fasted workout. But if we're talking about the clientele who might be watching right now, getting ready for monster games, and
Mhm.
they're really eating for training and then eventually eating for performance, is having a fasted workout something that's going to help them reach their goals? Or what are your thoughts surrounding that?
It's definitely, and this again, like this is like mixed opinions in the space for sure, right?
Mhm.
Anybody who knows who Rich Froning is, right? He
Yeah.
talked about doing fasted forever, like he never ate. Like that guy's kind of a crazy freak, right? He's one of those people that knows that kind of stuff and can feel it out. Everybody's different. Like if I have an athlete who's like, hey, like I have to work out early. I'm not a huge fan of food because of X, Y, and Z. I'm like, cool. What are you a fan of? Well, I usually get my element or I get my electrolytes in. Could we put a little bit of carbs in there? Is that something that's going to be beneficial? So that way they're not putting physical food into their stomach. A lot of times we'll talk about like nighttime nutrition, like, hey, I typically don't go to bed till 10. I wake up super early to go to the gym. Okay, cool. How about we create some sort of like, tasty nighttime snack and see if we can not front load it because that's not really a thing per se, but it's like, could we get something in at night that is going to be beneficial for you to make sure that our stores are up and we're feeling good first thing in the morning? It's like, yeah, great. If you eat at 4 p.m. and you don't eat again until you work out at 5, you could physically feel fine. People are extremely resilient. Your body could be totally functioning just fine. Is that optimal for you? And if it's optimal per your schedule, then it's like, okay, cool, crush it. Like, go for it. Like, you can make up the
Yeah.
calories after rates. The science says it's really not so much from a body standpoint where your calories are specifically for overall general recovery. Now, we're not talking about like people who train for multiple hours a day, but overall general recovery, it's more about your overall intake that makes the most sense. Okay. So as long as you're hitting your overall intake and you feel better training fasted, I say go for it. Do not, however, train dehydrated. Don't do that. Like, that's, you're really asking for a lot of issues with that. So I always say if you're gonna skip anything, food, fine. Water, never. Your the musculoskeletal issues and like injury issues and rates like that go up, all that kind of stuff. So if it's something that you're focusing on, it's like water, great. Food is here and there. Like, if you're not into it, that's fine, not a big deal. There's ways to work around it to make them feel good about what they're doing. I also will push people to try it, right? If you're like, I'm not really a food person, like, what about if you woke up like 10 minutes earlier and had just like a bite of banana? Is that a thing? And a lot of times that's more me seeing if they're willing to try something because you don't know what you don't know. You could wake up
Yeah.
and be like, did it, hated it. And I'm like, okay, don't
Moving on.
got to worry about it anymore. Yeah, we're fine. That's fine. Like, but did it, hated it. I'll be like, you know what? Didn't really bother me that much. You should never jeopardize sleep to wake up and eat, right? That's kind of like stepping stepping over $5 bills to pick up nickels. Like, that's sleep's the most important. So if
I
that's the
like that
piece,
analogy.
yeah. So if that's the piece of it, if you're like, if I have to wake up and eat, I got to wake up 30 minutes earlier. Man, don't make that trade off. Don't make that trade off. Sleep first. So yeah, so it becomes again very individualized, but it's if you have a coach is going to be grilling you on questions and asking you to try different things, just like you would if you're training your programming. You're going to try different pacing. You're going to try
Mhm.
breaks at certain places. Oh, maybe I could do this unbroken, and then I break up the next piece. Like, you're going to thrive in different environments. Nutrition is no different. Trying different things is good, and you will find out what makes the most sense, and then you're going to be most consistent, and then you're going to optimize your recovery.
So we're about, we mentioned 5 months away from Monster. We
Mhm.
want to give people enough time to, start tracking their macros, figuring out what foods go well with training versus recovery and all of these different things. If they were to start working with a coach within the next couple of weeks, is about 4 to 5 months enough time to really get them ready to be at optimal performance come July?
Yeah, I would say that. I would say that for sure. I mean, typically, for us, like, I get really nitty gritty with things. I tend to like really dial stuff down. I mean, we do all kinds of different like hydration assessments and like do a ton of stuff just to see where people are falling and like how can we enhance that even more. Not everybody has to do that, of course, but I mean, really, in my opinion, it takes probably about 2 weeks to really see and feel your eating flow. If you're somebody who eats the same thing every day, I'd say that's great, but at the same time, I'd also encourage you to mix it up. So there would be some questions about micronutrient diversity and making sure that we're creating like a whole profile of foods and things like that. Um, but typically 2 weeks, you're going to be pretty good. Within that 2 weeks, you would be able to find and figure out like what feels good for you from like a volume standpoint in terms of like when you train and don't and all that kind of good stuff. And are you getting super hungry, which is another thing. An athlete should not be hungry. Period. If you're an athlete and you're
Mhm.
listening to this and you're hungry, you got to change something. Yeah, got to change something. That's a no go. In really like taking those next like 3 months to really execute on it is going to be huge. You will see huge dividends on 90 days of focused nutrition on top of quality programming and like recovery. You can be, I wouldn't say a different person, but you would be really amazed at your output, your aesthetics, body composition. When you're hyper dialed, it becomes a really big thing. And it can be a really impactful and important thing, especially leading into a competition where you want to be peaking.
Mhm.
And really focusing on that. Absolutely. I would say that's plenty of time. But it's a lifelong journey too. So it's definitely, you're always
Mhm.
going to be tweaking it to some extent. I've had clients, athletes I've worked with for like 4 years, and we're always changing stuff. It's just like little
Wow.
small tweaks. It's nothing big, but it's like, how can we do this? How can we do that? But absolutely, 4 or 5 months, plenty of time.
Well, Brad, thank you so much. So many good little nutrition nuggets. If you want to work with Brad or anybody else from the Apex Performance team, you can check out their website. It's apexpn.com. You can get with a coach today. They have complimentary consultations. We will have one more episode for this series, and we are going to be talking about eating for performance. So now is the time you want to dial in your nutrition for the training. We hope you guys will be ready by the time July comes. And I know that Brad is going to help us every step of the way. And we'll see you next time.